Hey guys, my name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be doing a video that I've wanted to do for quite some time now, and that is going to be called Things That I Love in Books. And I know that that sounds like a very general, vague statement. A couple months ago, I saw my favorite booktuber, Books and Lala Kayla. She made this video called Things I Love in Books, and it was like a bunch of random tropes and plot points and different things that she really enjoyed in books. And I thought that that would be a really interesting video for me to make because we do have very different tastes, and I think it's so interesting to see the way that readers are so different and like the different tastes that we all have, because some of the stuff that ended up on her list of things that I hate in books are on my list of things that I love in books, and vice versa. And so it's weird to see how different readers can be and all the like different things we can enjoy and not enjoy. So I'm going to be doing those two videos as well, and I thought I would start with the things that I love because my queen Taylor Swift once said, "You are what you love." I have a list of 20 things that I love in books, and I'm going to be giving you some book recommendations that have these things in them if you're also looking for these things in books. Also, if you have any recommendations for me of books that have these things that I don't even know about, then please let me know because that would be super cool. It was just really cool to spend some time these last few months compiling this list. These are the things that I seek out in books. Like if a book has this thing, then I'm really probably going to want to read it just because I love reading about these things and I find them very interesting. Let's just jump right into the things. These are in no particular order, by the way. These are all just things that I love in books. Like there's not one thing that I love more than the others. We're just randomly gonna start with number one. The first thing that is really like specific that I really enjoy in books is I love stories that follow behind the scenes of a celebrity, and like we get to see the behind the scenes of like all the rumors and like scandal that they've dealt with. But I've realized that I only really like this when it's done with actors or like someone in a film scene as opposed to like music. Like I don't really like books that revolve around musicians as much as I like books that revolve around actors and actresses and like behind the scenes of movies and stuff. The only book I can recommend that has this in it that I really love is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. It features Evelyn Hugo, who's like an old Hollywood actress, and I just loved so much getting to see like behind the scenes of her life and like all the rumors and scandals she dealt with in her career. Like I just love that so much. But this is the only book I've ever read that I've really like loved that in. Right, the second thing that I love in books is books that revolve around weddings. Not totally sure why. I just really enjoy books that follow weddings. I guess just because weddings are just like so happy and so cute. And one that comes to mind right away is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren, because this book is like basically centered around a wedding, at least in the beginning, but then we follow mostly on the honeymoon part of the wedding. Weddings like draw people together. I just think it's like really interesting, I guess. Third thing that I love in books is books that feature an incredibly awkward and relatable main character. I am a socially awkward turtle who doesn't know how to talk to human beings. And so it's just really nice to like see myself represented in books sometimes, like really awkward main characters that are a lot like I am. And so some examples of that would be Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, which is why this book is one of my favorite books of all time, because Kath is the most relatable character of all time for me. Another character that's like this is Nina Hill from The Bookish Life of Nina Hill. I actually felt like Nina Hill was an adult version of Kath, and so I've never related to characters so hard in my freaking life. Fourth favorite thing that I love in books is aliens in a contemporary feel story. Contemporary coming of age book, but there's some slight sci-fi involved. Like that is my favorite shit. Some of my absolute favorite books of all time have this. We Are the Ants by Sean David Hutchinson is one of my favorite books of all time. And this book, it follows this boy Henry, who it's really like his coming of age story, but he's also being abducted by aliens every night. And so there's this very light sci-fi element to this book. Also, The Humans by Matt Haig. This is like a contemporary story, but we follow from the point of view of an alien who's in a human's body. Another book I very recently read that also has this is Where the Forest Meets the Stars. It's a contemporary story about this woman who sees this little girl on her property who's claiming to be an alien, and she has to witness 5 miracles before she can go back to her planet. And so any of these like contemporary feel books that have some like sci-fi to them, Like, that is probably one of my number one favorite things in books. Like, I love that shit so much. The number 5 thing that I love in books is character study or like literary fiction kind of books that span a character's entire life. I don't know why, I just find those kind of books so moving when you follow a character for decades and decades and decades, and you get to see really like how their life evolves and how they change, and if they have regrets or if they don't have regrets, or you know, it's just, oh my god, it's so fascinating to me, and it really like puts things into perspective. And some of my favorite books that span a character's entire life are A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo also does this, which I love. And then there's also Miss Everything by Jennifer Weiner and Ask Again Yes by Mary Beth Keane. These are definitely like literary fiction, historical fiction type books that follow characters for decades and decades and decades. So the 6th thing that I love in books is books that follow sisters or twins. I don't really know why. I mean, it's probably because of my really close relationship with my sister, but I just love reading about 2 sisters that are really close, or 2 twin sisters that are really close. Some examples of this would be in The Unhoneymooners. This book follows twin sisters Amy and Olive. Another one of my favorite books that has this example is Kath and Ren in Fangirl. I think this is my number 1 favorite portrayal of sisters in a book ever. It's also part of the reason why I love The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna so much, because of the relationship between the 2 sisters in this book. It's so strong. And also why I love Miss Everything by Jennifer Weiner. We get both of their point of views in alternate chapters, and we get to follow both sisters from the beginning, early years of their teenagehood all the way through the rest of their lives. And sisterhood is a main reason why I'm really interested in reading Summerbird Blue and If Only I Could Tell You. The 7th thing that I love in books is books that have writers or authors as main characters. Just get so fascinated reading about other writers, and it's probably because of my own desire to like want to be a writer. One of that, again, Fangirl. I love the fact that Kath is a writer. I mean, I know she writes fan fiction, but still, like, her motivation to write in this book really motivates me to write. Like, every time I read this book, I just want to write again. It's one of the reasons too why I love autobiography so much, because in this book, they're writing an entire book during their last senior year of high school. 8th thing that I love in books is ambiguous endings that don't really answer every single question you have, and they really make you think. Like, after you're done, you're kind of sitting there like, what did I just read? I actually made an entire video dedicated to ambiguous endings if it's something that interests you, because I just really, really love an ambiguous ending, and I love books that will literally make you question everything you just read. And some of the books that were featured in that video is A House at the Bottom of a Lake by Josh Malerman, The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay, and Verity by Colleen Hoover. I think my number 1 favorite ambiguous ending of a book, though, is The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay, because this book, holy shit. The 9th thing that I love in books is when there are letters of some kind involved with characters that have died. The letters are from the past, but the character is now discovering these letters from a loved one or from their lover or like from somebody in the past. And some examples of that is All Your Perfects by Colleen Hoover. This book involves letters. Another one is Loving Mr. Daniels, because this one follows this girl who her sister, another one with sisters, her sister has recently passed away, and so her sister left her behind all these letters for her to read when she like gets to different points in her life, and like, oh my god, made me cry. And another one that does this is Birthday by Meredith Russo, because one of these characters, their mom died when they were a kid, so they left behind a letter for them to read every year on their birthday. So the 10th thing that I really love in books is any books that describe the universe and like outer space, kind of make you think about the fate of the universe and how wild it is that humanity even exists. This is kind of another reason why We Are the Ants and The Humans are some of my favorites, because these books kind of talk about how ridiculous humanity is in the full spectrum of things. They kind of just talk about how vast and big the universe is, and I just find astronomy in general to be really, really fascinating. Like, it was always my favorite subject in school, and I even love it in like non-fiction settings. Like, I read Stephen Hawking's book last year, Brief Answers to the Big Questions, and this book is basically like a science nonfiction book that is answering questions like, is there a God? How did it all begin? Is time travel possible? And like, will we survive on Earth? Oh my gosh, like anything science related with like outer space is like my jam. Like I love it so much and I'm so fascinated by it. So any books that really like talk about the universe or the fate of the universe, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, just really fascinates me and it's one of my favorite things. 11th thing that I really love in books is books that discuss the idea of a multiverse or like an alternate reality, and we kind of get to explore both realities. Or some books that do this is Maybe in Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid, because this one follows this girl and she gets to a point where she has to make a decision and we get to follow both alternate realities of that decision that she made. Another one that does this more sci-fi-y is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, as well as Recursion by Blake Crouch. I feel like Blake Crouch is like the king of writing science fiction where there's these really cool like alternate realities involved and you just get lost, like so lost trying to read these because there's just so many things. And Dark Matter is honestly one of my favorite books of all time, and it really discusses the idea of this multiverse because this guy wakes up in a world where his wife is no longer his wife and his son was never born. The 12th thing that I really love to read about is hockey, which is super random, I know, but it's because I just really love hockey. And it's weird because I didn't actually like watch hockey a lot growing up. Like I didn't really discover my love for hockey until I was a teenager. And then I just really like fell in love with it and I just love watching it so much. Like it's so entertaining. So anytime there's hockey involved in a story, it just really makes me want to read it. And one of my favorite books is Him by Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy, because this is a male-male romance that follows two hockey players. Another one of my favorites is also by Elle Kennedy, and it's The Deal by Elle Kennedy, and that one's like a male-female romance between a hockey player and this girl. Even if it's not like romance related, like the book Beartown, like I just really love reading about hockey for some reason, so any of those are just very fascinating to me. The 13th thing that I love in books is also another kind of shallow-y thing, and it's baseball players. I love baseball so much. I was always a huge baseball fan growing up, still am. I'm a Dodger fan for life because I'm from California. I actually played softball too for 5 years growing up and I really loved it as a kid. And so I just love reading about baseball and baseball players in general. One of my recent favorite books that I read that involves a baseball player is Evie Drake Starts Over by Linda Holmes, because this one features a Major League Baseball player who is retiring, and then it's a romance between this girl and him. So the 14th thing that I really love reading about is books where a character is discovering or exploring their sexuality. And I know that this can be deemed as the gay for you trope and people think it's really trashy and whatever, but I personally really love it. I love books where like a character is realizing, oh, maybe I'm bisexual, or oh, maybe I'm gay and I didn't even know. Some of my favorites for this is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. Our main character Alex is realizing maybe he might be bisexual and he didn't realize it before. Another one of my favorites is Him by Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy, because Jamie has always assumed that he was straight and now he's realizing that he also might be bisexual. And another one of my favorites is Top Secret by Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy. Apparently Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy just really know how to write great male-male romances about male characters exploring their sexuality. 15th thing that I really love in books is books that take place in New York City, or just like any city that feels like a very prominent part of the story. Like the city feels like it's a character in the book. I recently read The Arrangement by Robin Harding, and my favorite thing about that book was that it took place in New York and it felt like such New York vibes. I also love Before We Were Strangers by Renee Carlino because of the New York vibes in this book. Like it's such a New York feel book. And more recently I discovered that I love books that take place in Alaska, because Alaska just feels so atmospheric and it honestly feels like it's another universe because of the weather there and because of the people there, and I just love reading about Alaska so much. Some of my favorites are The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna and The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker. Both of these books take place in Alaska and they're just so atmospheric and beautiful, and they make you feel like you're also in Alaska. But yeah, New York has got to be my #1 favorite though, because any book that takes place in New York, like I'm guaranteed gonna read it probably. Like if it takes place in New York, that's just a great bonus for me, like because I love New York. I've only been to New York once, which is unfortunate. Like I'm trying to go back. The 16th thing that I really love in books is when there's a story within a story. Sometimes it does have to deal with when you're reading about a character who's an author and then you get to like read from their story as well, which I really like that. But I also just like any kind of story that's happening within a story. In It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, I love that you're reading about her diary entries and it feels like it's a separate story from the one that's currently happening. Another example of that is Lies She Told by Kate Houlihan, but this one is more of like an adult thriller version where this main character is an author and then we're reading about her book like within the story. So every alternate chapter is her book. The 17th thing that I love in books is when you read an adult thriller and it has these like paranormal, spooky, creepy vibes to it, and it kind of makes you question what is real and if this place is haunted and if there's like a ghost involved in the story or not. Two of my recent favorite thrillers that have done this is Lock Every Door by Riley Sager and The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. Both of these books have those hella creepy vibes going on where you're like, is this place haunted? Or like, what's going on? They're just very atmospheric. Another thriller that I read last year that did this that I really enjoyed is The Broken Girls. This one takes place at this like haunted old boarding school where you're not sure if there's like a real ghost or something. It's just real spooky and real cray-cray. The 18th thing that I love in books is books that make you sympathize with the situation that you never thought you could feel sympathy for. Forbidden by Tabitha Suzuma and All the Ugly and Wonderful Things by Bryn Greenwood. Both of these books have situations and romances that would make you cringe when you first hear about it and think to yourself probably like, why the hell would I want to read that? But honestly, both of these books just made me feel so much sympathy for these characters, and these characters just really like wormed their way into my heart. They just made me feel a lot of things when I wasn't really expecting to, and so I really love when a book can really make you question your own moral compass and just kind of think. The 19th thing that I love in books is a very specific thing, and that's when we only visit the characters once a year and then we come back and see them after a whole year has passed and see how their lives are different and what has changed. Two books that I really love that do this is Birthday by Meredith Russo and November 9 by Colleen Hoover, because in November 9 we follow these two characters who meet every day on November 9th for 5 years. And so we only get to see these characters on November 9th when they're meeting each other again and they haven't had any contact in between those November 9ths. And it's just so fascinating. Like, I don't know why, I just really love getting to see characters only one day of the year. And then in Birthday by Meredith Russo, we follow these two characters who share a birthday and they're best friends, and we get to only see them on their 13th through 18th birthdays. So we follow them once a year, every year on their birthday, and kind of see how their lives are different or how they're the same. God, this book is so beautiful. This book was like a sucker punch to the gut because it also features a trans character, and it's just one of the most beautiful books I've ever read, ever. All right, and the 20th thing, like the final thing that I really love reading about in books is poetry collections, like modern poetry, or books that are told in verse, like poetic verses. Like, for example, The Poet X is a book that's told in verse, or Skyscraping by Cordelia Jensen is told in verse. It's told in like poetry form. But then I also love some modern poetry collections. Like, I really love Love Her Wild by Atticus, but I'm very like particular and picky about the kind of modern poetry that I like. Like, these ones are really beautiful because they feature a lot of like photographs as well as poetry. Same with like Love Her Wild. Like, there's a lot of like black and white photography in this book, and it's just really beautiful, really well done, and it was just very artsy. But like, there are a lot of cases where I think that modern poetry can be very cliche and like boring. So I'm like very particular about the kind of modern poetry that I like. Like, I don't like all of it. These two are definitely some of my favorite modern poetry collections that I've ever read. But I'm always down to read poetry collections. Like, I always want to give them a chance. I used to write poetry when I was in middle school, and I've always wanted to get back into it. And so I just really love reading other people's poetry because it just inspires me so much to want to write my own. And I think poetry is a lot like songwriting, and like you can say so much through a song or a poem. I used to songwrite a lot in high school too, so I think I just have a really soft spot for reading poetry and songwriting and that whole thing. I also really love when books feature characters who are songwriters. I probably should have made that the 21st thing, but like, I really like love reading about songwriters because it's something that I related to like when I was in high school. It's part of the reason why I'm really interested also in reading Summerbird Blue, because I've heard that this book, the main character in this book is a songwriter and she writes songs with her sister. I think that one Casey West book called P.S. I Like You, that book featured a songwriter, and that was one of the most like relatable Casey West books for me because I just really love following a songwriter. Those are all of the many things that I love in books. I'm sure I left some things off this list that I'll think of in the future and be like, oh my god, I didn't even realize. I'm sure my reading tastes are going to evolve and change, and maybe in the future I won't like some of these things. Thank you guys so much for watching, and please let me know what your thoughts are on these things. Like, do you also love these things in books, or are these some of the things that you don't like in books? You can also let me know that because that would be pretty cool to know. If you have any book recommendations for books that have these things that I didn't mention, then please let me know because I'm always on the lookout for books that feature these things. Thank you guys so much for watching as always, and you can expect another video called Things I Hate in Books probably coming soon at some point after this video. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Look at this absolute mess after filming this video. Oh my gosh. My bookshelves are destroyed.